And we're back with another episode of Before You Buy, that show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. As usual, it's me, Jake Baldino, and I apologize, I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit. We've been putting out a lot of these videos lately, but it's time to go. We're talking about Mafia Definitive Edition today. This is a remake of the original Mafia game that started the series way back in 2002. I was very, very much a fan of that game and was really looking forward to this, despite, some reservations about the original studio not making it. The studio behind Mafia 3 is. Still, despite Mafia Definitive Edition kind of sounding like some sort of re-release Game of the Year edition, this is a ground-up remake, taking the elements of the original game and representing and retelling them with modern graphics and modern video game stuff. Despite that, it actually still feels old. Now, before some of you Mafia fans yell at me in the comments because I know how particular some of us can be, I'm glad it feels old. It feels old in a good way, and I'll explain more as we go. Really, I think they kept the original game intact enough for this to be an enjoyable, refreshing trip down memory lane with some new and exciting stuff and a good old dash of nostalgia. It's worth checking out if you're a Mafia fan. It doesn't recreate everything as perfectly as you would imagine, and some of the charm is missing here and there, but I still had fun playing through Tommy's adventure, and that's the main goal, right? Newcomers might have a bit they'll be surprised by, though. I'll get to that as well. Now, the game itself takes place in the fictional city of Lost Heaven in the 1930s. It's modeled as a Chicago-inspired setting, I'd say, honestly, with like a dash of San Francisco in there too. But it's very much a Chicago-y 1930s Prohibition, Depression-era tale. You play as Tommy Angelo, just kind of like a regular generic Chicago, Lost Heaven guy who is a cab driver who one day suddenly gets wrapped up in the dealings of one of the local crime families, and then the rest is history, if you've seen any Mafia movie. Just so you know, all the footage here is only the first half of the game, and I've kept the story stuff down to just the early stuff to avoid spoilers. This is a single-player narrative story game, first and foremost. It's a game with lots of good cutscenes and really interesting story beats. Unfortunately, they ditched the original voice actors. I kind of like the original Tommy, and I miss him here, but they've all been replaced with actors using their voice, their likeness, and motion capture for a lot of the scenes. And they do a really good job. It takes a tale that has a lot of stuff you may have seen in some movies, but gives it an all-new layer of subtlety here, and more realistic character stuff than the original game did. Just from how characters are, to how they look, how they act, how they speak, down to the more harder, more Chicago-style accents, which might be jarring to some people. It's a tale of crime, loyalty, love, and betrayal, and the developers have taken the time to flesh out certain things in the plot that felt more brief in the old game, kind of making the story have more of a well-rounded feel, but with nothing really completely left out, save for a few things. The love interest, Sarah, for example, is way more of a person this time around and actually gives an interesting performance. And it goes from the people over to the world they built. Lost Heaven is awesome. It's a city stretched across 3 island districts with unique-looking areas, some interiors, and it also just looks pretty damn good. There's also an expanded countryside area, something that was in the old game, sectioned off by a big loading screen. And they did a good job of making it feel familiar, but new, generally. Graphically, the game's regular daytime shadows don't look so hot, but everything else about the game world is stunning. This gameplay was captured on PC. Rainstorms look the coolest with the streetlights and neon signs and wet roads, and then there's the cars themselves, which they clearly paid a lot of attention to, like they always seem to do. You cruise around on roads filled with awesome details like vintage advertising and old Prohibition posters that are actually kind of eerie. The game also reminds you of the Depression, in notes and newspaper clippings you pick up. And speaking of that, the collectibles do return. Old cheesy advertisement cards are scattered around the world, waiting to be found for a completionist or a trophy hunter. Now, in Mafia, you're driving, you're shooting, and you're punching. That's what you're doing. You're mostly driving. And I might have a bunch of people disagree with me here, but I like the driving here a lot. I almost love it. Cars are pretty damn fast. probably maybe unrealistically fast, but whatever. They slide around roads with a good amount of fun factor with a dash of precision to it. You can also switch to simulation mode, which will give your car a bit more trickier handling if you choose. You're gonna spin out a lot, trust me. Now, one place that driving improves the overall experience is that infamous race car mission. I have a bit more to say on that without spoiling things. I'll probably save that for a video on my other channel. But they also added motorbikes, and they handle well too, and they're pretty fun. And there's like a ram button for when you're in car chases, but I barely use that. You can also shoot while driving when you're dealing with chasing someone, or you're being chased, and that leads me to one of my issues in the game: the police presence. So with the simulation gameplay option, you're supposed to limit your speed to the speed limit with a toggle button, or else the cops will pull you over. This was kind of a thing in Mafia 2. This is typical Mafia fashion, and once again, like Mafia 2, it's toned down. The original Mafia, you had to legit drive and obey the law. Here, it's pretty loose, and it doesn't really matter as much. Cops are never around, and they only seem to care about speeding and sometimes fender benders. They're barely on the map, so you don't have to really think about it much in terms of like driving properly. And when they do pull you over, it doesn't really matter anyway, because money isn't really a thing. Now, playing on the free ride mode, I ramped up the difficulty and put all simulation modes on just to see if I could get some sort of difference, and it was still barely a thing. Now, maybe I'm just missing something, or maybe it's just nostalgia from the old game. I'm not sure, but I wanted to point this out for the hardcore OG Mafia crowd. I know some of you guys like the realistic traffic law simulation stuff. Still, generally, I like the driving and the chase sequences a lot. The shooting controls are a bit murkier. In my opinion, I don't quite like the way the shooting controls feel. Yes, it does feel a little bit like Mafia 3. I didn't really mind the shooting in 3. I saw the shortcomings, but here it all feels a bit more loose and more awkward. Navigating my character around chest-high walls and having him miss cover, sometimes just awkwardly, it all kind of dampers the fun a little bit. The aiming feels okay. There are options to have more of a snap assist or not. I played with both ways back and forth and never really felt satisfied. It just generally seems to not be one for precision, and the hand-to-hand combat I think is much worse. I don't enjoy it at all. Weird button timings and awkward, glitchy finishing moves that clip kind of kill the vibe. Even if some of the animations are cool, it just doesn't feel as engaging to you. Now, even though I'm not 100% happy with how the controls feel, the stuff surrounding the on-foot shooting combat stuff is pretty good. First of all, the Tommy gun I think feels really good to use. They just nailed it. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's satisfying. Along with that, there's a nice amount of destructibility, too. Some cover can get shot up, some debris can fly, there are explosive barrels, and some of them lead to some really awesome moments. Death animations are bloody and convincing. Dudes slump over, they crawl for help. It really makes up for the fact that sometimes the AI really looks dumb, like running around looking for cover. I've caught dudes popping up from cover, looking around and confused, running to another spot only to then instantly turn back around and run back like a confused idiot. Some of the behavior is really weird, and I feel like I keep saying it in videos a lot lately, but we've got great graphics in 2020, but we need to work on AI in general. That's a broad thing anyway. I digress. The other big thing I want to point out is that this isn't really an open world game at all. This game is almost entirely linear. You play a mission, and usually that mission ends, and it's on to the next one. It's not up to you to go wander around and find the mission out in the world, or get distracted out in the open world. There's not much out there. You can really kind of tell, too, because the city looks great, but when you go walking down the street, you can see there's less detail and less reason to be there. But that's because the focus is on the story. No optional minigames, no weird side quests that distract from the plot, just a straightforward playthrough. Well-paced, not super long, not super short. This is a game with no open world padding whatsoever, no endless checklists. I like those tasks sometimes in certain games where they make sense, but it feels like every game has them crammed in nowadays. So Mafia being a simple story-focused action affair made it feel really refreshing and all the more fun and interesting, especially since it has that dash of nostalgia, which they really hammer home with the beautiful original theme re-recorded. And although it is linear, you have the optional free explore mode from the main menu that lets you run around and do whatever you want. Since the game isn't designed around open world doing stuff, there's not much to it, but you can pick whatever outfit you want, any time of day or weather, and any car in the garage, and you just do your thing and get lost in the world and listen to the old 1930s music. Also, there's a little something something extra thrown in there for you to discover that I won't mention here. So if you can't tell, I like Mafia quite a bit. There are some things cut from the original games that I kind of miss, and I think the shooting just feels a bit mediocre, but I enjoyed playing through this adventure and the new, stronger presentation of the story. It's also nice that it's not a full-priced game, and that certainly helps sometimes. I think some new fans might be surprised going in seeing there's no open world stuff, maybe even disappointed, but I love that about the game. But of course, that's a before you buy. You know how this goes down by now. I give you pros, cons, and a bunch of personal opinions, and now I want to hear your opinions down in the comments. We got access to a review copy of this game, so we've been playing it for the last week or so early, but once you get your hands on it, we'd love to hear you in the comments. What's your favorite Mafia game? I know it might seem like nobody likes 3, but there were moments of it that I really enjoyed, but honestly, ultimately, the original Mafia, the trench coat Tommy gun stuff, that's what I truly love. So I want to hear from you guys. What do you think? If you enjoyed this video, maybe we helped you out, clicking the like button is the best way you can help us out. And if you're new, maybe consider subscribing because we put out videos every single day. But hey, as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.